Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of The Teacher's Point of View. I'm really excited to have actually three people on today. So we've got Rabia Masud, we've got Jessica Long, and we've got Stu Evans. A variety of people actually, because one's a head teacher, one's a special needs teacher who's been in it for a number of years, and then we've got Jessica, who's obviously only been in teaching for like 4 years, and she kind of gives a fresh kind of view on what the decisions that were made. So I mean, Stu, Rabia, Jessica, welcome. Obviously, we'll go straight to it. I mean, in terms of like the decision that was made last sort of at the beginning of the week, and the views on like sort of the children having like sort of school shutting down as well as the exams being cancelled. I mean, what are your views? I mean, should we start with Jessica first? I mean, she's the newest in teaching. So Jessica, like what are your views on kind of what's gone down this week?
To be honest, it's been pretty chaotic across the board. From September, I feel like most people have been able to predict it's quite likely that schools are going to close at some point. It's quite likely that exams aren't going to happen in the way that it's expected. But we've been recommended to push forward. Everything's going to be normal. Everything's going to be fine. We found ourselves once again in a position where everything's come out last minute. We've got students due to sit exams at the moment. Today, during these next couple of weeks, they have exams going on. We've got students ahead of time thinking, am I sitting my exams? How is my assessment going to work? We've jumped back into not to prepare for it. We've been told that it's not really going to be needed, and we've seen it come, and we've done our very best to prepare, but we've just been thrown back into another state of uncertainty, of knowing a little bit more about how everything uncertainty.
Sure. I mean, like, what about you, Robbie? I mean, like, how are you feeling about it?
I mean, everything Jess has just said is basically in a nutshell. I think it's been mentally and physically exhausting. Coming home on Monday and then hearing all of that, it didn't feel like we've just come back after a Christmas term. And I think that was the thing, that we couldn't actually relax over this 2-week break that we had, because we didn't know what's going to happen. And I mean, as a teacher, you think ahead, you think about your long-term planning, your medium-term planning, all of this, like, what am I going to be doing? And it was like, well, because with special needs, you know, I'm more productive actually in the classroom with students. It's going to be a very different experience for the online learning. I mean, I've been asked, would I like to do that, or would I like to be in the classroom? And I've said, well, I'd rather be in the classroom, quite frankly. And I think it's definitely raised a lot of questions. Last lockdown, we had things like key workers, but all right, now the definition of key workers is changing. We had before things like special needs. With special needs, it was a case of vulnerable EHCP plans. And now again, it almost seems like, although they've said that, yes, schools are closing and this, that, the other, slowly, everybody's kind of creeping back in. So there's just a lot of miscommunication, a lot of information missing.
I mean, you've had a bit of a tough week, haven't you? I mean, like there was a lot of uncertainty. The unions have said don't go in, and then obviously you were kind of expected in some respects, weren't you? And then you were kind of told that the kids are going to stay at home, but then you've pretty much had all your classes in. So I mean, like, what are the emotions that you've gone through?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I'm honest with you, so my colleague and I, we only made it in Monday and Tuesday because I'm quite susceptible to chest infections, and I had I could not tell whether I was feeling, was it exhaustion or what was it? So then I was told, no, stay at home, go and get a COVID test, which came back with really quickly, and it was negative. So that's fantastic. That was great to know. But having been in those 2 days that we walked in on Tuesday, kids have come in that I didn't necessarily expect. Not that many, there weren't that many, but then it was a case of we need to ring around and we need to find out. Now again, that's going to change, because like I'm saying, we need to be able to establish who are those who really need to be in, who of those maybe we can put on a rota system. Working with special needs, we always have smaller classes anyway. So it's not as bad as, we'll say, somebody in mainstream, they would have a class full of 30. So it's not, again. But this time around, I think what's worrying everybody is the fact that last term we were just trying to keep our practices, carry out hand hygiene, all of this. this time we're being told, well, there's a good chance you're going to get it from a younger person. So I think adults are now starting to worry a bit more.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Stu, talk to us. I mean, you're a head teacher at the moment. I mean, how difficult has it been, like, kind of trying to keep up with these guidelines and then try to prepare your school to kind of adhere to those guidelines?
I think that's been the difficulty of it, and it's almost as though lessons haven't been learned from the first lockdown. I know a number of head teacher colleagues who, in the first lockdown, we were getting updates 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day that were in various different formats. So there were LA updates, school leader updates, parent updates, and those were coming out every single day. And it got to the point where head teachers were just spending all their time reading the updates and not actually having the opportunity to do anything about the updates and action those. And it's felt certainly over the last few weeks as though we've kind of gone back to that a little bit. And it's that information overload, and it's constantly changing every day. And I think my concern is that there's a real lack of understanding from leaders in the DFE as to what actually goes on within schools at the chalk face. And with all of these changes, what do school leaders need to do? What do middle leaders need to do? What do teachers need to do to action all of this? You put all of that action in place, and then it changes again tomorrow. So you set up plans for X amount of pupils, identifying these pupils, and then the identifiers change tomorrow. So you're having to rejig all of these plans, if not rewrite them all. I understand that things are moving rapidly and it's a rapidly changing scenario. But as I think Jess said earlier, we've kind of known this was coming for a few weeks now, haven't we? And given that there's suddenly 1 million laptops available, I suspect that the DFE have known for a few weeks as well, because that just doesn't happen in 5 minutes either. So I suspect that they've made plans in plenty of time that they can roll systems out, even though some of the rollout of all of these systems is quite shocking. But actually, just to drop it on us at 8 o'clock in an evening that you're going to remote learning tomorrow morning, it wasn't good. And especially when kind of mental health of staff and pupils is high on the agenda at the moment, you kind of worry what their thought process is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, they knew about the mutation of the virus back in the middle of December, didn't they? Because that's when they first mentioned it. So, I mean, they knew for a couple of weeks that it was coming. I mean, like, I'm starting to think that it's a very reactive approach from the government. I mean, do you guys kind of agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, but
I agree. I think it's got to be reactive. That's the nature of where we are at the moment in these circumstances. Who knows what the next month, the next 2 months, the next 6 months is going to look like? We don't know. So in some instances, it has to be reactive. I think within the media, certainly the leadership unions are asking the question, yes, we need to react, but what we're missing is the contingency plans for if this happens, if that happens, so that they can immediately turn to those plans and implement those plans. What they're having to do is make changes without the plans to back up those changes. So we get a lag, we get an announcement. There's no clear guidance around that because they're waiting to formulate what that guidance should be. So the sands are constantly shifting.
Yeah,
absolutely. I agree with everything you've just said over there. And I think the other thing that is, we talk about we need to be proactive almost in a way. Yes, this virus, this whole thing is something, this pandemic is very unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this. But again, at the same time, we need to kind of, I think it's really important we should learn from other countries as well that have been successful, and what they've done well, because otherwise we're always going to be playing catch up. In a growing society, pandemics are inevitable, the way we are living, the way, it is. And it's a case of, okay, the vaccine's here, but then there's 3 different vaccines. How often do you have to have this one, that one? Like you said, there needs to be clear contingency plans to know what's happening right now.
Yeah. What about you, Jess? Like, what do you think?
I think, again, the response is just, it's been very reactive. It's been very, very last minute. And I do feel like a lot of it's just almost been, they've been fighting against it. They've been in denial. They don't want to admit that schools do have to close. We're very rushed at the minute, I feel like we want to get back to normal. We want it to be so schools are open, shops are open, and businesses as usual. Countries around the world, they're starting to reach a certain level of normality. And I feel like we're trying to rush to get to that point when what we need to do is take a step back and say, look, what we've done so far isn't working. Every time we try to get some normality back, everything starts spiking again. The system goes into overdrive. We have to pull back. We don't have any secure plans in place. We don't have this disaster recovery. And this cycle is going to continue repeating until we can learn from our mistakes. We're already going around in a loop. This year is pretty much repeating exactly as it did last year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, do you feel like the decision that was made in terms of shutting schools down was the right decision?
Absolutely. I feel like it was the right decision, but I feel like, again, they left it too late. They knew this decision was likely going to be made, and they put it off for as long as possible. I feel like if they'd made that decision from the get-go, and they said from January, we won't be returning to schools, this is going to be the plan, people will be more prepared for it. We had the Christmas break. That would have been plenty of time for people to calm down a little bit, reset themselves, prepare themselves for a solid term of online learning, not getting back into the classroom, preparing a term's worth or a year's worth of resources for back in the classroom, and all of a sudden having to go back and literally overnight, not even being aware of, am I in school tomorrow to help with the vulnerable students, or am I working from home tomorrow and delivering my lessons online? There was no time at all to prepare, even less than last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Stu? I mean, obviously, as a head teacher, you're the one that it kind of the burden falls upon in some respects, because you've got to ask your teachers to put their lives on at risk coming in, but ultimately there's no clear indication from the powers above in terms of what's actually going on. I mean, do you feel the lack of clarity makes your job that much more difficult?
Yeah, the lack of clarity, the ambiguity around the guidance, and so some of it's kind of a fine balance. Some of the decision-making processes that are left to head teachers and left to make at a local level, it's great in one sense, but in the other sense, what it does is create inconsistencies, especially for schools that are on borders. In that one LA might be operating one way, another LA might be operating another way. In terms of should schools be closed or should schools be open, I don't really want to enter into that debate. I'm not a scientist. I don't go into the numbers enough. Anecdotally, I'd say, yes, potentially they should be closed. However, the vulnerabilities of certain pupils, they should be open to certain pupils. You've got the economic argument with regard to keeping the economy running and all of that. Does that outweigh the significant deaths that we're seeing now? That's why the political leaders are in the positions that they are. So it's really difficult, and it's difficult for everyone. I get that. The frustrating bit is the ambiguity that comes with the guidance, and it's only after 2, 3, 4 days of questioning any guidance that's released initially that we finally get to what it is that they actually want. And again, going back to my previous point, that then changes. So I've been working with my senior leadership team to identify what pupils should be in school and what pupils should be at home. Let's put aside how we code them in terms of attendance, because that's its own nightmare as well. But we've been working on that today. There's no saying that won't change again on Monday. And that's the complete cycle that we keep going round, and it's that hamster on the wheel, isn't it? That you keep going and you keep going, and at the moment it's very difficult to see any change that might be happening in the future. The flip side of it is we've taken some real positives out of the last 12 months, if I'm honest. The remote learning, we already did home tuition with pupils who had significant anxieties around coming into school. And for me, what the remote learning has shown us is that it is a genuine option for pupils to meet an identified cohort of pupils' needs. Where they are anxious, we can deliver a good quality of education, not in school. So what I'm basically saying is, does every kid have to be in the building to receive a good quality of education? I don't think they do, actually, moving forward now.
Yeah, for sure. Just kind of question on that though. I mean, those kids that do suffer anxiety from coming into school. I mean, what are we doing to prepare those kids? Because ultimately, if they're having anxiety coming to school, are they going to have anxiety going into workplace? And what do we need to do to help these kids?
Yeah, it's for me, it's part of a longer term transition package. So we don't leave them on home tuition for a long period of time. We don't leave them on remote learning for a long period of time. But what we do is use that opportunity to build relationships with pupils, with their key workers, with those key teachers, so that actually they can start to bring them back into school, and we make that transition from home tuition, remote learning, through to a blend of home tuition, on-site learning, through to complete on-site learning, identify that appropriate pathway, because you're quite right, they do need to function in society. They can't just sit at home all the rest of their life. So we do work on that. It's not remote learning isn't an end game. It's part of the process of getting them working appropriately and within a school setting.
Yeah, fair. I mean, just in terms of obviously one of the decisions that were made. I mean, one of the decisions were to cancel exams this year. I mean, we'll start off with you, Rabia. I know you're quite passionate about this. I mean, what are your views on whether exams should be cancelled or not?
So, I mean, as you know, I started off in mainstream. I'm a qualified secondary science teacher. And one thing I've had just before we've come on to this, I've had a message from a student that I have been supporting for the last 3 years, because as well as stepping into special needs, you know, I still dip in and out and support. And a really panicked message saying, we've just been told by our teachers that we are still having our mocks, but we are going to have our mocks online next week. So it was a case of, can you please help me with some work and this, that, the other? And I said, don't worry, you know, yes, we'll have a look at it and do it. So again, it's coming down to this whole lack of communication, definitely. As far as I had been aware with the student and with the school, they hadn't mentioned anything about mocks. And what was interesting, that was also written in the message, is your mocks are going to be taken remotely, you're going to be doing them at home, we're going to do them next week, and we will put these towards your predicted grades or the teacher assessed grades. So obviously you can imagine how many kids right now, and it comes back to the thing that Stu mentioned, and I've said to you as well previously, mental health is one of the main things that I'm such a big advocate for it, that right now that is what we need to talk about. There was a really interesting article that's written, and I've shared it online, by a student who was saying, basically, I am a year 11 student, and all the emotions and everything they're going through and how they're feeling and the anxieties. And it's the fact is that we need to think, you know, are we doing best for them in the long term? Yes, I know there has been discussion, and I have openly said before, I do believe that we should involve families and students in these conversations for specifically year 11, because I think they've been the year that's really they've been affected the most. You know, they've hardly had any time in year 10, and then now they've come straight into year 11. There's a lot of panic and there's a lot of anxiety there. So we really need to think through. But this message, to get this through on a Friday, and I checked the timestamp on the email that had come today as well. It was about 4:20 from the actual member of staff to the students. And I was thinking, Friday, 4:20, and you're saying this, by the way, we're having your mock on Monday. It doesn't seem right to me that, I mean, everything Stu's mentioned before, in terms of the, because I've worked for alternate provision before, and those models that he's saying, I very much feel that we can bring those into mainstream. I think, you know, COVID is highlighting the issues that we actually have in the classrooms and mainstream, where 30 kids is just too many. If you have 20 kids, potentially, you can actually give them a better quality of education. But more than that, you can, you know, develop those relationships, promote those confidences that need to be instilled in there. So right now, I mean, this is the first I've heard. I will no doubt find more information out this weekend. But I just think it's very, very unfair. I can't understand how it's fair to students.
Yeah. I mean, what about you, Jess?
I really do feel for students at the moment. My heart goes out to every single one of them. I know of students who are taking exams with international exam boards, so they don't know if they're sitting exams at the end of this year yet or not, because they don't follow the same guidelines from the government, because again, they span over multiple countries. We have students who are sitting exams with like BTECs. They have exams going on at the moment. And I feel for the schools as well, because the government said it's the school's discrepancy as to whether students are able to sit these exams or not. There's been no notice given, so schools are almost, they're struggling, saying, well, what happens if we go ahead with exams? What happens if we don't go ahead with exams? What's the result going to be if some schools go ahead with them, others decide not to? What's the moderation going to be like to make sure the result is fair? With all of the reports going on as well at the moment, where parents have been encouraged to report schools to Ofsted if they feel like the quality of online learning isn't good enough. It's seeming more like they just care about the data. They care about the moderating across the board, putting everyone into categories and boxes, saying, this is your number, this is your value. Well-being is almost pushed aside a little bit. It's exams and assessment and numbers that seem to matter more, and it's a real shame. We want the best for our students. We want them to focus on their well-being and get the best out of their education. That there's just been no time to plan, and it seems the solution just seems to be to mount more pressure on top of it to almost push us into working day and night until we have an efficient solution.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a niece that told me last night that she's got mocks towards the end of February, and I mean, she's pretty much going to be doing an exam that she was going to be doing in June. I mean, like, I mean, talk about kind of giving them less preparation, because that's going to account towards her final grade. And it's like, well, you're basically springing it on them within like 4 weeks. I mean, and Rob, you're talking about like 3 days. So, I mean, so where is this level of consistency that is giving everyone a fair opportunity and a fair crack at getting a good grade? I mean, it's just clearly there's so much disparity between the whole nation in terms of what they're actually doing. I mean, Stu, like, what do you think?
I think what teachers are doing is trying to fill a black hole that's been left, and DfE have announced that it's teacher assessment. So actually, we need to get loads of teacher assessments in, and there's no guidance on it. So, and I think that's the reality of it, is the lack of guidance. Teachers want to do something about it, and we're very keen to do something about it. We don't like sitting around and waiting a month, because that's a month that pupils potentially aren't progressing. That's a month where we're not sorting something out. So I think it's what a lot of teachers are trying to do is get the evidence towards the grades that they're going to get or that they're going to give, so that when it comes to moderation, because there's been noises about external moderation and how that might look, and it's still very much unknown. So they're trying to fill that void with something, because we like to know what we're doing, and we like to know what we're aiming for and how we're going to do that. So we feel the need to, if it's going to be teacher assessments, we need to do some teacher assessments to be able to evidence that grade, because actually there isn't a lot of trust in the workforce at the moment from the DfE. So in order for them to trust that grade that I'm putting into that box is valid, I need that evidence base. So I need to gather it quickly. I need to gather it now, because I don't know what it's going to look like further down the line, and I might miss an opportunity. And I think that's the real difficulty is, and again, it's been announced, the off-qual consultation is next week for a week. They're going to probably take another couple of weeks to unpick all of that consultation, put a plan in place. So you're talking mid-February, end of February, before anything comes out about how exams are going to run or not run, or how grades are going to be awarded in the summer. The other aspect that concerns me is with regard to the disparity against vulnerable pupils. Last year was very much teacher grades for, and we've got all the algorithm and what have you, teacher grades for academic qualifications, GCSEs, A levels, AS levels. What what we then had was a requirement for most pupils to sit any vocational qualifications that they had. So we still had to do the coursework element of it, not to the extent that we would have done in normal circumstances, but a lot of these more vulnerable pupils follow vocational pathways because that sits right within their skill set, right within their comfort zone, and they're being disadvantaged by a pupil following an academic GCSE A-level route gets given a teacher assessment for it. And I know it's not quite as simple as this, but they get given a teacher assessment for vocational route, still has to go through all the exam hoops, coursework hoops, and all of those different aspects to get that grade. So there's a real disadvantage and a disconnect between academic routes and vocational routes, and both are equally justified. But I think the DfE is hell-bent on this academic route followed by a university degree and all of those different aspects, where unfortunately, and I've said it to the group before, a one-size-fits-all curriculum doesn't fit all. And if we try and make it fit all, kids are going to fall outside of that box, shall I say.
And that's exactly, and I completely agree with you, Stu, because you say, you know how you'll know as well, we say that we should differentiate in our classes and our lessons and all of this. But then when it used to come to the exams, I still remember when we do the year 7 and 8 end of term tests and they, you know, end of year exams, they give them to us and there would only just be one paper. And I'd look at that and I'd say, well, you know, how can I give this to a student who might be in a lower ability set? Because this is really going to impact them. You know, they're going to be like, well, I can't do anything after the first question or something like that. So we need to definitely think about it. And again, you know, as you're mentioning about the vocational courses and things they can access, it's made it very difficult for people to be able to go and, you know, for students to be able to do the more horticulture, those kind of aspects, going outside and basically experiencing those things. And so again, you know, we talk about how we can differentiate. I'm very much more of a hands-on kinesthetic kind of teacher. And right now it's a case of, okay, well, if I want to be able to do something, I need about 10 sets of it.
I think it goes back to what is the purpose of education? What is the purpose of a pupil spending 6 years in primary school, 7 years in primary school, however long in secondary school, whether it's post 16 and all of that, and what do we want to get out of that, and what do they need? Absolutely. Is it a set of letters against their name? Is it a set of numbers against their name? Or is it something genuine that they can then offer their communities? And so it's not about what you know, it's about what you can do. And
it's about getting a skill set for surviving.
Absolutely, and so that you can contribute into the real world, be that through employment, whatever it may be. So it's that holistic view of what do we want by the end of year 11, by the end of year 13, what should they be able to contribute and how can they do that?
And they should be able to have their prom and things like that. I never had a prom, but still, you know, all these things that they look forward to. I mean, we forget the social aspect of school, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. It's what helps them become confident.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, I think what we're talking about here is so important, and it's been a big theme of the podcast in some respect. Is this one major focus on one exam at the end of every 2 years, i.e. year 10 to year 11 and year 12 to year 13. And actually, like from my experience, I'd rather have people that might not get the best grades, but they've got something about them. They've got confidence, they've got personal skills, they've got an ability to interact or challenge ideas and be innovative. And unfortunately, those vocational skills that Stu mentioned, they're perceived to be the subjects for those less intelligent students. And it's I mean, it's this perception that we kind of hold dear to the UK nation for some reason. I mean, what do you think we need to do to kind of change that perception of that one exam and compared to like those vocational skills?
I think a lot of it comes down to one thing I've said to you before, you know, in mainstream schools, the whole concept was we should be all inclusive, you know, we should allow those, just because you have a special need does not mean, I've said this to you so many times, does not mean you are not able to do well. I have got students who I'm learning new things from every day and who's so intelligent, so bright. So I think the biggest thing, like it's how much funding we have, how much access to resources we have. Right now, one thing that has confused me a lot as well is if I'm going to have to be doing remote learning with some learners and they are entitled to, you know, a member of staff, somebody supporting them one-to-one, how is that going to work exactly? Am I then relying at whoever's at home to be able to take over that?
Sure. Oh, Stu, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we were starting to do, we're on quite a journey in terms of special measures and hoping to get out of it very soon. But one of the things that we were starting to do prior to the previous lockdown was really drive our careers, education, advice and guidance. And actually it's engaging employers and talking to the pupils about what it is, what do you want from a potential candidate? Do you want a full set of GCSEs? Do you want some vocational qualifications? Do you want a mixed bag of that? Do you want some kind of assessments that you do that you can show competency in a whole level of skills, and use them to articulate their needs to the pupils? Because actually what the pupils then start to buy into is to be able to get myself into a job, start work, have a career. Yes, I do need the exam, but I also need to know how to communicate. I need to know how to be resilient. I need to know how to problem solve and all of those different things. And I think for me, it's rather than I've got a B or a C in this exam, or a 4 or a 5, or a pass or a fail. Actually, I can show these competencies and a skill-based competency framework that we can then say pupils can do this. This pupil is articulate. Yes, you can demonstrate that through speaking and listening within an English GCSE, but you can also demonstrate that in a hell of a lot of different ways. So it doesn't have to be through that one format. So I think utilising wider formats to show what pupils can do is certainly something to look at moving forward.
Absolutely. Jess, what do you think about it?
So it's carrying on a little bit from what Stu and Rabia have been saying. I feel we need to focus a little bit less on the idea. I mean, exams are obviously important. They are a great tool for assessing progress. They might, there's definitely some tweaks that need working out on them, but it's the interpersonal skills and the professional skills that are really important to build. We have students that at the moment, they're so focused on ticking that box of getting that score and having that grade to say, this is how good I am, this is how skilled I am in this area, that they're resorting to things like copying and pasting answers. They're too scared to get an answer wrong. They don't want to ask questions. They don't want to admit fault. They're terrified of being seen as not understanding something, which of course in education is expected. If students knew all of the answers, we'd be out of the job. We wouldn't be needed for anything. So we need to try and break down the barrier of students being scared of not understanding something, scared of not knowing, and build up that communication. So when they get into the workplace, if they do start to struggle, if they do start to have difficulties, they know who to talk to, they know what to do, they know when they're not just going to let the pressure build up until they reach breaking point and until they burn out. They know that there'll be avenues that they can take. They've been taught from a young age, if I don't understand something, it's okay. I'm not going to get in trouble for not knowing. I'm not going to get in trouble for asking for help. And that's one of the most important things. It's not just for professional skills and interpersonal skills, but well-being. Adults, I know people in the profession that still don't know how to do that themselves. I've still very much been learning myself how to reach out and ask for help because of this system that's ingrained within education, which is you have to study hard, you have to get the answers right. This is the leaderboard, this is the scoreboard, here's the top of it, this is where the good people go, this is the bottom of it where the low ability people go. And we need to break down that stigma. Students have different needs, they have different requirements. They will work at different levels and different standards. Just because one student might not be level 9 on an academic paper, they could be phenomenal in a practical sense. They could be amazing at project-based work. So a lot of the exams and a lot of the systems that we have don't really work in favor to highlight the overall abilities of the students.
Yeah.
And I really agree with you, Jess, on that one, actually. Sorry, TJ. I was just going to say, I really do agree with you on that one, because, again, like I said, it's coming down to structures. If you have 30 kids in a classroom and you have one teacher and you have a 45-minute lesson, how can you really get to know I don't really care what the DFE says in that sense. Like, you will do the best. You do want to do the best. And I'm that person who will stop. I will stop if I can see that people are struggling and they want to, there is no point trying to force feed and deliver something if you're going to lose, if kids are just going to become, the students are going to become very lacking confidence. They're just going to switch off. They're going to be like, what's the point? You're just going to carry on going this way that needs to be. And it's, again, coming back to, you see, I do feel teaching is one of those things that's really micromanaged. And I know we can have discussions left, right, and centre, but it's a case of, I'm not going to question how that A&E doctor is working. I'm not going to question how that accountant or anyone is doing their role. And with teaching, it just feels, the more years I've spent in it, the more I'm kind of keep being told, well, you don't know what you're doing. And it's really frustrating. And I've always been a very, let's be solution focused and avoid negativity like anything. But I have to say, this week and the way things happened on Monday, it was so hard to stay positive. And that's the biggest thing that's right now, is that teacher morale, staff morale. I've said to you before, it's not just teachers, it's everybody. And the support staff, they are literally, I've had staff in tears this week because they're just exhausted.
I'm sure there's been head teachers out there that have been literally on their knees this week. They feel that the whole weight of the world is on their shoulders in some respects, because teachers are first to be penalised. It's almost like, I remember the article that came out, and because children weren't going to school, they no longer knew how to use a knife and fork. And it's like, at what point are we going to start holding the parents accountable? Because it's not your job in some respects to teach kids how to use a knife and fork, is it?
Well, it's one of those things I talk about. It's about life skills, though, isn't it? I know what you mean about the knife and fork, but the whole point is, we need to appreciate parents, so single household parents as well, and things like that, doing the best that they can. But I just think, like right now, as Stu, you're just making me laugh on that. How Stu has just said about the whole, we've been told this is what we're going to do, but there's no guidelines. Kind of sit in limbo for a month and a half, and then we'll let you know. How about you just kind of let us try what we were going to do? It might actually work.
Yeah. What do you think, Stu?
I think that just a couple of things, and remind me to come back to your not holding a knife and fork thing in a minute. For me, what we're talking about, and what Jess was talking about, is the high stakes accountability that pervades its way right from the DFE all the way down to every single pupil who's sitting in an exam. And it really impacts on the inclusion agenda that people are trying to move forward, so that all schools are inclusive schools. And a little bit, it falls into that kind of football manager mentality, in that as a head teacher, as a senior leader, as a teacher, if you're not producing the results, you're gone. And that high stakes accountability around Ofsted, around league tables, around performance, Progress 8, of which numbers of pupils do not fit into that Progress 8 little basket. Yeah. They don't fit it in, and we had the discussion a short while ago. But actually, that high stakes accountability is really damaging to the whole profession, I think. It makes people very inward looking. It makes schools very competitive against each other, because actually, if I'm helping you to do better, you might move above me in the league tables, push me down, so that in my local authority, I fall further down the league tables. So it's kind of toxic in a way. Going back to your kind of pupils not being able to hold a knife and fork, absolutely. What we have had is, and what's been written in the media, is pupils regressing in terms of their progress being at home, and we can parent bash and do all of that. There's no doubt that some parents need support in their parenting, but often they've learned that from generations, and I look back to my first child when I got home, with him having just been born. I got home and I'm holding this baby going, what do I do now? and it's only kind of based on your experiences of
Absolutely.
your own upbringing that you start to, Maslow automatically kicks in, doesn't it? And it's you start addressing the needs of these of your child, but some parents haven't actually experienced that in their own life. So is it school's job? I'll throw that open, but actually it's school's job to work really closely with parents, with families, with social care, so that there's this umbrella around and this team around the pupils and the child that supports that child to make developmental progress in their early years, academic progress, if you want to call it that, later on, but progress, whatever that looks like, throughout their life.
Yeah,
I mean, you know what you.
Can I just add to that? Sorry, Robbie, but can I just add to that? I mean, like, education is the pillar of every single industry, right? I mean, literally every single industry forms from education. So when you're talking about kind of having a personalized education, the way that you're talking, I mean, you're talking about a level of depth that teachers have to kind of go through to make sure that they prepare these kids for life after school. And what winds me up in some respects is the complete disregard for the profession, and then the kind of lack of support from the powers above for the profession, but then they expect so much from you, and then you've got such high accountability. I mean, it's in my opinion, it's a bit of a broken system. You know, I say a bit, it's a broken system. You know,
Yeah, it is.
And like, what do we need to do? Like, do we need to start fresh and just start looking at kind of how education needs to move forward, or do we kind of need to implement new strategies to make it more efficient and more effective?
We need to communicate, first of all, and going back on what Stu's saying, everybody's competing against each other. I've worked, across, so although the 7 years that I've been in education, I've worked in a lot of different schools at the same time at different places, and I've been a governor for 3 years in a trust, and I have seen that everybody wants to do it slightly differently. Every place just wants to have, they're doing the same thing, but they just want to have their little logo on it and their little things, and it's such a shame, because why are we competing in that way? So going back to what Stu said, but also is it a vicious cycle of things, right? You know how we talk about, are we in a cycle of things like parents 20 years ago? We're saying, are those parents able to do everything right now? Literacy and numeracy are the main skills. We can argue this, at everything. Yes, and the other skills as well of actually being able to, be an all-rounder. So are we just having these circle of, repeated circles that carry on happening because we haven't addressed something, and it does need to be addressed now? Like I've said to you, COVID hasn't caused problems in education. COVID's highlighting the issues that have been there, and we have been literally shouting for so long. And people are aware, and the government's aware, but it's whether people want to whether they want to listen, because right now what they're doing isn't listening.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what do you think, Jess?
I've got actually quite a lot to say on this sort of area. When it comes to education, especially up to pre-16, so up to year 11, people tend to forget that we're pushing these academics, we're pushing these skills, and it's a lot of the time it can be a subject that overall the student's interested in. Overall, I like physics. I don't like this element though, so they find it really difficult to engage. We're pushing it onto them, and we're saying you have to engage with this. You have to tick these boxes. We've only got X many weeks until this assessment, so you need to be able to get this done. Young people, their executive functioning hasn't fully developed. It won't fully develop until they're in their mid to late 20s. They won't have the advanced ability to be able to identify the needs over the wants. They don't have the ability to accurately prioritize. Now they've been thrown into a position where they're working from home. They don't have a teacher reminding them consistently about what the needs and the wants are. They don't have the face-to-face connection. We can't expect the parents to sit in front of them all day and give them the same attention that we would. We're not standing in front of the classroom. We can't expect the parents to do the same. They have jobs to get to. They've got things that they need to do as well. So now students are in a position, young people are in a position where they're trying to almost force this growth, grow up before their time, and overdevelop this or try to imitate this developed functioning that allows them to prioritize, and they don't have the ability to do it. And it looks as though the government's response to do that is, let's put more pressure onto the teachers by saying, if your child is getting a little bit distracted playing on the Xbox so they don't do so well in their home-based assessment, report the schools to Ofsted, because it's the teacher's responsibility to somehow maintain this focus and maintain this connection with advanced physics and maths and computer science when they're sitting surrounded by all of the comforts of home and all of these temptations, and their brains physically haven't developed at that point. So you can't blame them. They physically haven't developed to that point that they're able to prioritize accurately and make those decisions themselves. Some of them are able to, but we can't assume that it's going to be a one size fits all, because, well, we already know one size doesn't fit all. Everybody is a little bit different.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about that announcement Gavin made to parents. I mean, like, how frustrating is that to hear, like, from a teacher's perspective?
For me, the one aspect of it is teachers go through training. They either do a 4-year degree, PGCE degree, GTP, whatever routes that they're taking into teaching. And all of that training is based on pupils being sat in front of them, or the pedagogy around that is based on a pupil sat in front of them. What teachers are now being asked to do, I say we, not me, because I'm sat in my office, aren't I? But what teachers are now being asked to do is change their pedagogy, change their method of delivery for something that they've actually had no training on, and for something and I'll make a very sweeping statement here, for some of the older generation teachers who have been brought up over the years without kind of PowerPoint and all of those different aspects, for them to suddenly jump on Teams and Google Classrooms and everything is a real difficulty for them. And they haven't had the extent of training that they have to come into education, and yet they're now going to be judged on sort of delivery. And I know the whole judgment is not based on individual teachers' delivery. It's based, the guidance talks about the whole school delivery of remote education, but undoubtedly it will drill down to what does that quality look like at an individual level for that group of pupils, and for that group of pupils, and for that group of pupils. And it's disappointing, because actually they haven't gone through that process. Nobody's been taught how to deliver remote education effectively. Everybody's been taught how to do it in a class, and quite rightly, it's holding people up into level of performance for what they've been trained for. They haven't been trained for this. So why are you going to start beating them over the head with this? And what's great is that loads of people in the media today, 5,000 emails to Ofsted about that have gone in today, a significant majority are saying how well the schools are doing. The strap line to that is that Ofsted are filtering out all of those positive messages to find the negative messages.
Yeah.
They're scapegoating.
Can I just add to that? I mean, the thing is these are unprecedented times, right? And it's really difficult to be a teacher. I mean, you're literally in a complete new situation, and almost like you're penalised, and you're held accountable for these kids not receiving a good education. But Jesus Christ, let's look at Gavin Williamson. I mean, when are we going to start holding him accountable? I mean, like, he's literally in a mess of the whole education system, and then he's trying to pin it on teachers. I mean, it's the most frustrating thing to view. Like, for somebody that works closely with educators all day long, I mean, it's so frustrating to watch from the outside. I mean, Rabia, Jess, how do you feel?
That's the whole point, exactly. And I'll come down to this. You know, when we've seen the likes of Matt Hancock and everyone trying to run the NHS and things, and people are saying, this is what we're saying. Teaching is too micromanaged, right? If you can trust us, if parents can trust us, first and foremost, the first lesson you learn in teaching, or you should learn in teaching, is to develop relationships. And those relationships aren't just with your students, they are with those who are at home, agencies involved. They're within your, trusting your peers who you're working with as well, to know that this is what you can do. I've only been at my school for a term. And I can honestly say, hand on my heart, I am so lucky to have the support of the parents and the guardians and whoever we have at home, to the fact that I've, if I give them a call in the holidays, we did just before we were coming back, I asked if I could give one of them a call. I was worried about them, and they just really appreciated it, because the reality is, this is not, we can say it however we want, the pandemic was unprecedented. The way things are being handled, you should have your contingencies. These are the little summaries that we're saying. Our borders have never been closer. We are always going to be playing catch up. This is a whole thing that, we can argue till whatever. We have some of the cheapest, as the consultants have said, the cheapest tests in this country for testing, which only have 56% degree of accuracy. And that is in itself, we're putting so much money into it. So we've got whatever is going on in the whole grand scheme of things. And then you're going to turn around and say, yeah, these people who really respect every teacher, every member of staff who goes into school cares about that child. Safeguarding is always our first thing. Our first priority is that child okay? And you are now trying to turn around and say, well, actually, if you're not happy with what's going on, forget the fact that we haven't given you internet, or we haven't given you an iPad or a laptop. Everything that's ever gone wrong is the teacher's fault. And what's been lovely to see is the messages, like Stu has said, that have come through and said, no, this isn't the case. The government needs to take accountability for its actions. Gavin Williamson was threatening to sue schools 2 days before in London before he actually shut them down anyway. The man's never spent a day in education. So as I've said to you, I don't really respond well to people who haven't been in a classroom.
I mean, we're meant to have these world-class track and trace systems. I don't know whatever happened to that, but that's I mean, Jess, what are your thoughts?
I think a lot of it is, we have people who don't have the experience. They haven't been on the front line. They haven't worked as a teacher. They haven't worked as a middle leader. A lot of them haven't worked as a senior leader, and they're the ones who are dictating down. We do have people who have worked in education, who are in positions of Ofsted and the Department for Education. The issue is, and I think this comes back to learning those interpersonal skills, learning those professional skills. No one wants to speak up. You go into this profession, and it could be 10, 15, 20 years down the line, maybe I could find myself in a position like I'm working for the DFE. I would get there, and it would likely be, and this is probably a story that's happened to a lot of people, it's this is the way that we do things. No one wants to speak up because you don't want anyone to look at you in a negative light. You want it to be, well, I know that this system's broken. I know that this isn't working, but everyone else is doing it. I don't want to cause a ruckus. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I'm just going to keep my head down and keep things going. And the government seems to have taken that approach again with the school closures. They've pushed back against it. They haven't wanted it to happen. They've been resisting it. It's reached a point where they can't deny it. It has to change. And this pushback, this leaving everything until the last minute, is really concerning, because we have this system. It is broken. It doesn't work. People have been saying it from when I was in school. I remember being in year 7 and having students and teachers alike saying that this system doesn't work. It hasn't worked for years. It hasn't worked for decades, and we're still doing it. We are at the perfect opportunity now. It's unraveled 2 years in a row. Our system is being completely upturned. We're having to almost wing it and come up with a new system. We can't go back to this when this is over. We can't just say worked well enough before. Things are starting to normalize. We've managed to push back just enough that we can keep skating through on this broken system. How many more years and how many more decades are we going to try and flog a dead horse, essentially?
Yeah, absolutely. Stu, you got anything to add to that? I mean, that was well said, Jess, by the way.
Yeah, I think I mean, it's interesting we talk about people in power and not having their skills and experience, and questionable those who have been appointed power, whereby their experience is questionable in their inclusion agenda, being from schools with exclusion rate, etc. So you've got to worry about those people in power. But the one thing really humbling and heartening for me is listening to Rabia and certainly my staff at my school and in all the schools I've worked with in the 20 odd years I've been in education. I've met one who roll their sleeve up and go, do you know what, stuff this, let's just come with it, because I've got kids that I've got to work for. And I'll make it work. My staff make it work, whatever thrown of them. And they do.
Oh, we lost him.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it, Stu.
Yeah, I'll just iterate the point that actually staff, pretty much all staff that I've worked with in 20 years in education, they just go, let's get on with it. Got kids in front of me who need educating. What they will do is whatever's thrown in front of them, and it goes back to that kind of kid doing a set, do mock exam tomorrow. That's what the teacher that they need at this moment in time. So they'll do what they feel is right, they need to do to make this work. And that's what every teacher that I know, and every head teacher that I know is doing currently, is what they need to make this work will do. And you can hand part, certainly all of my staff, is they do it with the kids' best interest at heart.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, teachers have been absolute heroes like throughout this pandemic, in fairness to the profession. And this is why, I mean, ultimately, we've got to be having these conversations, because I feel like there is this level of kind of hurt within the profession. They feel a little bit let down by powers above and the media and maybe some of the people that are criticising the profession, because ultimately I know a lot of teachers, majority of teachers, wear their heart on their sleeves, and it's like almost like they've put their heart into this, and it's just being stomped on in some respects, because they feel like they go above and beyond. So, I mean, I feel for you teachers. I mean, like, just to kind of sum it up, like, what do you guys feel like you would like to see in terms of improvements within like the way things are being run, or like what improvements in the way that education kind of needs to go, if that makes sense?
I'll start on this one. I think we need more communication. We can't just have one person saying this is how it works across the board. We've already got categories of students, SDN, pupil premium. We've got all of these categories that say they need to have some form of additional support. There is a gap in their education. If they are taught with this same canvas, if they're taught in this exact same system, it doesn't work. They've tried breaking it down into these groups. Again, we still have issues across the board when it comes to how are schools trying to narrow the gap and give equal opportunities for all students. And we really do our best. If we've got one person trying to say, here's how it works for everybody, we know that that's not the case. We need to have people from special schools, from technology schools, from higher ability, lower ability, the early years, right the way up to secondary, and even collaborating with colleges and university. We need to hear from special schools. We need to hear from everybody to try and work out what works. We know that assessment in certain schools isn't going to be identical. We know it's not going to be the same, because we can't tarnish everyone with the same brush and use the same methods. We need to hear from everybody involved. It's not just the teachers. It's not just the teachers dictating what happens. Students know what they need. The parents know what their children need. We need to hear from everybody. Everyone involved in the system needs to have a little bit of input, and we can work from there to identify exactly what it needs to change. We know that it does. We just need to work out how. We can't work out how as long as we have one or two people right at the top who are actually extremely far removed from the actual experience of it. We need to know what's happening on the inside. What do students need? What do teachers need? What do leaders need? And then we can work from there to try and make some of these changes.
Sure.
I agree with that, and naturally on the back of that is that DFE is run by a cross-party group, so that every 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, the agenda doesn't change, so that we can get some real consistency in the long term as to what education looks like and what are we trying to achieve out of it, covering all the conversation that we had throughout today. But that cross-party agenda, cross-party agreement that's advised by people who have worked at the chalk face, have considerable experience, and the right kind of experience, because that's important as well, because there's lots of people out there who have the wrong kind of experience, and experience of high exclusions, of lack of inclusivity, all of those different aspects. So it's getting the right people in the right chairs, but ensuring that that is maintained in the long term, so that we can really start a move, because we could start something in the next 2 years that, with a change of governments, gets thrown out and we're back to square one. So that real cross-party discussion, that what is it that everybody wants out of education, what is it that we need out of education, and everybody's in agreement, so it doesn't change all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely, it's a sum of what we've all said, which is so fantastic to see that we're in different parts of the country, I suppose, and you're in different roles right now, but we agree to this whole, and the fact that TJ can bring us together to have a conversation. This is what we always say: education needs to be run by educators. And I've passionately always, I mean, I didn't know I was going to be a teacher. TJ knows my story. I never thought I was going to go into teaching, but the fact is, you know, we have to have that teacher autonomy. We need to work together. How can you make a decision about education without actually speaking to those in a classroom? Because you will make us, we are absolutely, you know, we are responsible, as you can say, for those targets, those grades, whatever. We are responsible. We are, if something goes wrong, it's on our head, it be. But at the same time, then you need to listen to us in terms of, if you're going to put that there for accountability. But first and foremost, right now, you know, my only plea to everybody, especially in the government, in the DFE, is just think about these kids and their future, and think about those who are coming up as well, because it has become such a negative and toxic environment, like Stu said, that it does make me worry the number of teachers that we're going to lose, the number of educators we're going to lose, and what's going to happen to education in the future.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just to kind of touch on what Stu said about having someone in education that's actually going to be here for a period of time. I mean, what changes do you realistically, or what changes can you realistically make within 18 to 24 months, which is the sort of the lifespan of an education secretary in the UK for the last like 10 to 20, I mean, 15 to 20 years. I mean, like what needs to probably happen is similar to the NHS. They get given a budget, for like, education gets given a budget for the next 10 years, and it's run by educators, the specialists, who should collaborate with schools across the country and find out what's best for them. Because I mean, I don't know where this broken communication is, because apparently Gavin Williamson is listening to head teachers, but every head teacher I've spoken to, it says it's an absolute amount of rubbish, and I don't know who they're talking to. So, I mean, I don't know who these secret head teachers are, but I'd love to hear from them if you guys know. But I mean, obviously there are some changes that need to be made, and ultimately it's about kind of having these conversations so we can get the numbers. I mean, they might have the guns, but we've got the numbers, right? So let's start actually making a difference and getting our voices heard. But I mean, just to kind of leave it off, like, does anybody want to say any last thing just before we end the chat?
I just want to say, I mean, there's a whole, we can carry on talking for another number of hours around initial teacher training and the need to broaden that and in pupil understanding. But I'm immensely proud to work in the profession. I'm immensely proud to work with the teachers that I work with. The group of staff that I've got at New Leaf are some of the most skilled practitioners that I've worked with in 20 years. And that's why we've moved the school to the point that we are. And what that has shown me is that there's a real lack of understanding within kind of the training framework for teachers to be able to meet pupils' needs and meet the diverse needs of pupils. I'm lucky that I've got that. I've been able to recruit that over the last 2.5 years, and I've got some of the most talented staff that I've ever worked with, and they understand pupils. And we've got to get to that point where teachers understand pupils, and not just those who fit into a mainstream box, but those who sit outside the box as well. so that we can work with everybody. But the profession's going through it at the moment, but as they always do, and this is what makes me proud, is we get on with it. We might have a moan about it, but ultimately we're still working in the background while we're moaning about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And off the back of that, I just want to say, and I've always said this, TJ, I couldn't do my role, I couldn't do my job without the support staff that I have, and especially with special needs. And you know, they are the unsung heroes. They're the ones everyone forgets about: the learning support assistants, the teaching assistants, the moving and handling teams we've got coming in. You know, everyone who's coming in at the moment, despite having kids at home and all that. And I can't, you know, I have to mention them in this whole thing.
No, absolutely. Can I just add to that though? I mean, it's not that we and again, it's not me that it's not that I disregard them. It's more that teachers get attacked. So I feel like I have to defend the teaching profession. Do you know what I mean? It's not that I'm forgetting the support staff, because they do an amazing job, and like the school tick. I mean, you've got like HR managers that are covering sick at the moment, sending letters home. You've got admin that are constantly chasing up stuff. Do you know what I mean? And it's hard for everyone, but it's the teachers that are at the sort of front line in terms of the judgments and the sort of scrutiny. So in that respect, I feel like I have to defend teachers. So I know we talk about teachers. It's because they're the ones that get the heat. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, we should absolutely mention them. I mean, Jess, do you have anything to say?
I almost can't put into words the admiration that I have for people in the profession. I get the benefit. I live at home. I don't have any kids. I don't have any additional responsibilities, and I still crumble under the workload. The people who are trying to maintain families, and they're trying to maintain teams and departments, if they're working in a position, so middle leadership, head of department, head of faculty, senior leadership, I can't even begin to say, this is a profession, you don't do it for the money, you do it for the kids. We are at a point where we've run out of steam, we're running on empty, and we still show no signs of slowing down. We're not giving up. It doesn't matter how beaten down that we tend to get, we keep on fighting, because we're not fighting for us. I mean, we do want to fight for us, but our precedence is, yeah, we're in hot water, we're struggling to keep our heads afloat, but let's get the kids out. Let's get the kids ready and let's get them moved on, because they are by far the most important thing. And I've never known a profession like it that is so driven by the people that they work with and the people that they work for. Even despite the abuse that they get, they're not letting themselves get beat down. So I just have to almost tip my hat to all of the teachers out there for being able to stay strong through this such a horrible period.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of emphasize what you're saying, I mean, obviously the teaching profession should be absolutely so proud of everything that they've achieved over the last year. And ultimately, like those teachers that feel like they're alone in the way that they feel, I mean, hopefully this conversation would kind of give you some hope that you're not alone, and that there are people feeling the emotions that you're feeling. But it's about coming together, and ultimately it's about these kids and obviously about your well-being too. So like, let's reach out to someone, speak to somebody, collaborate with someone, and like try to work out a solution. And I know, I mean, that your backs are against the wall in so many ways, from like the powers above as well as the pressures, but and the accountability, like we've spoken about in this podcast. But I mean, you guys are doing a phenomenal job. So I mean, thanks so much for coming on, sharing your views, and everyone, thanks for watching. I mean, guys, like it's been an absolute pleasure, but we'll leave it there.